Well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of our good friend Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. Hi, Bob. Are you there?
No, I'm here only as a spirit.
All right, fine. Well, we'll talk to your spirit. Anyway, lots of exciting things are happening. My goodness, my understanding is that all these car dealers all across America have been selling all sorts of cars. I mean, the economy is picking up. Well, of course, the reason the car dealers are selling cars is the fact that first of all, they closed down most of the dealers. Secondly, or at least almost half the dealers. And secondly, why, of course, the government was going to give $4,500 for an older car if they just turned it in so they could destroy it to get it off the road. But then, of course, basically what's happened is the government isn't paying. And here are all these poor old car dealers. They've got their, maybe $2-3 million owed by the government. And why, my goodness, the government's computer system is so inadequate, and they just don't understand it. But the car dealers aren't getting paid that. I mean, a lot of them are having real cash flow problems because they depended upon the government. It was like free money, and now they're finding out what happens when you look to government to pay your way. What was it somebody once said, when the government tells the farmer when to sow and when to harvest, why we'll be short of food, that's happening as far as the car dealers are concerned. They're having real problems. What do you hear?
Exactly the same thing you hear. And another thing that's very, very problematic is that they don't have many used cars for sale because they're destroying these cars, and I don't know what's going to come of it. The used car dealers all over the place are shutting down. They don't have any merchandise, or very little, not enough to stay in business with. So they just take the cars to auction, and the 5 or 10 or 20 they got left, they just auction them off and walk away.
And, of course, we're closing down the car dealerships. About 3,000 are to be closed down. And then we even hear that Reader's Digest is going to file for bankruptcy. And certainly more and more of our newspapers are getting into trouble. But they tell us that things are getting better. My goodness, look, we didn't lose as many jobs last month as we lost the month before. We didn't lose as many jobs in July as we lost in June. That means we're coming out of the recession, or does it? No, we're not coming out of any recession. The key is public spending, and people are saving money. Of course, we had a bulge the month before last because of the spending from the stimulus package, but they're still probably saving 5%, and they're paying their bills off. I mean, look at the sales figures; they're deplorable. And, of course, the other thing is, of course, that you can't go out and borrow money as readily as you used to. A society such as ours is built upon credit. And certainly the large banks aren't lending, the small banks aren't lending because, of course, they're getting paid interest by the Federal Reserve. The Fed is doing everything they can to prevent lending, but they're not telling the public that. They don't want them to know that they're trying to destroy our economy. This is Dr. Stan, and Sidney Bob was talking about how Fiat Motor Company, we gave Fiat Chrysler. We didn't sell Fiat to Chrysler. We didn't put it up for bids to see who would like to get Chrysler. We simply gave it, of course, gave Chrysler to Fiat because the head of Fiat happens to come from the Trilateral Commission, as does the assistant CEO of Fiat. So we gave it to them, and of course Fiat is going to start opening up new plants. And of course that's what we want, isn't it? We want more jobs in America, and Fiat's going to start opening plants in Mexico. I saw an article where they're going to start producing Chrysler cars in Italy. But how is that going to help America? Well, let's look at General Motors. Certainly, General Motors used to have about 250,000 employees, maybe more than that, but at least 250,000 factory workers. And by the end of December of this year, they'll be down to 40,000 factory workers. And we've given them $50 billion because we have to keep the automotive industry going here in America. But General Motors is shifting its production to China. It's got to begin importing cars from China into the United States. It's shifting its production to Brazil, to Russia, to certainly to India. And their General Motors plants are thriving while they're shutting them down here, and we're financing the shifting of American jobs overseas. But we can't tell the American people. They wouldn't understand the high goals of our globalist leaders. But go right ahead, Bob.
And it's a tragedy. They just simply don't get it. And, I'm running a piece, a letter to myself from a man who I've known since he was about, I would say about 9 years old, and now he's in his late 40s. And he got a PhD as a teacher. And he says, it is appalling, the ignorance of the children. He said, they don't know anything about anything. This is in California. He says the same all over the country. And he said, I just don't know what's going to happen. They're dumbed down in school, and of course the television is generally no help. And he says, I don't know where it's going to all end up. And so, where is the future? Well, it's going to be difficult to say.
Oh, I agree with you, too, because I really think, of course, basically Bertrand Russell talked about that in his book, The Impact of Science on Society, on page 53. He's writing in about 1953, and he says, by the use of diet injections and injunctions, we'll be able to control the minds of the children so that they'll never be able to think independent of what they've been taught in school. What diet? What are they going to put in their diet? They're going to put fluoride in their diet, and aspartame and other things that are going to affect the mind. What are they going to put in injections? They're going to put mercury in that, and aluminum and other things to have a toxic effect on the brain. And then we wonder why, when we watch Jay Leno and we see these poor kids he's interviewing, and he asks this one girl about what she thought about the Gettysburg Address, and she says, well, I think it's great, but I just don't know where it is. I don't know the address there at Gettysburg. And she was really serious. They asked somebody who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They didn't know who lived at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., but they sure knew who lived in a sponge under the sea. So this is the end product, I believe, of certainly not only a failed education, but the toxic effects on the minds of our children. Why would anybody want to do that unless you wanted to destroy this nation?
I carried that tape this past week and had it in the forecaster as a link in the U.S. section.
Was that the SpongeBob of the Gettysburg Address?
Yeah, I did, and I've never carried anything by Jay Leno before, but he's just trying to show people that the state of education is dreadful. My daughter's a teacher, and if you step out of bounds at all, you get reprimanded. You've got to stay within the curriculum. You can't give them any extra information. It's awful. And some of these children are smart. And she's got 3 children. They get all A's. And but they're well disciplined, and they're trained to study. And their mother and father have very high IQs. Maybe that says something to do with it. But anyway, it's not good. And we'd have 2 or 3, at least 2 generations to catch up if we did everything right with these people.
Well, unfortunately, Bob, we don't have 2 or 3 generations. We're going to have to face what's coming down the line. I can see a further contraction of our economy. I can see the unemployment going up to 25 or 30%. I can see the progressive destruction of the value of our currency. I can see closing down more and more American manufacturing, unless, of course, they go to war and then they can justify opening up the manufacturing again. But the way things are going, certainly, why we're shifting our manufacturing overseas. And even if we try to open up our plants, so many of them are over in communist China. Gee, I wonder if that set us the weapons we need to go to war with.
Well, China has its own set of problems, too. They just injected $1.8 trillion into the economy. 1.2 trillion of that was in loans. Good part of it ended up in the stock market, which went up 84% in the last 2 weeks. It came down, and that's what is affecting markets now all over the world, including ours that went down today. And they still have 30 million unemployed people. I think this is going to hurt their banking system. They're sitting on about 1.1 to 1.3 trillion dollars worth of U.S. treasuries and agencies, other investments in the United States in dollar terms. And